in video making, and some of the texts that we were reading I found extremely interesting. We were reading Debord's Society of the Spectacle and Laura Mulvey's on the 3 types of gazes, and Giuliano Bruno's Screen and Surface, and so we were questioning a lot about the surface texture of the screen and projection, like what it really is sort of projecting this image, these colors of light onto a surface, sort of like, I like comparing it to a canvas you're applying an additive image onto its surface, and I like comparing it to video because it's sort of, or especially the projection, is sort of the same. And within my video you sort of see me using myself as a canvas, using green screen as a canvas, or green screen as sort of this like portal or like magical like invisibleness that can be replaced with another image. So this state of creating and helped me move from my state of like staleness and unmoving. And so my very first critique, I remember I was sort of in between the state, and I created this like stop motion video. It was like very mediocre. I was very inexperienced with camera. I did not know how to focus the lens, and like super minimal with my editing skills. But I realized later that it wasn't so much my technical inefficiency or inexperience that was damping me, but it was sort of my reluctancy to make, to create, to. And so my very first critique, Victoria said to throw a wrench in it, and that was my like aha moment. So the very next critique, I like threw myself into my work, even though I didn't know how to use that wrench, so to speak. And that's how it sort of picked up for me. It was the first time I put myself in front of the camera, was doing things that made me uncomfortable. In stage of it, looking at on my computer at the editing program, I have like, so as I'm performing, I have no idea what it would look like, but I kind of have an image in my head as I'm making it. But then when I'm in the program, it's sort of like this push and pull of like, I assert some control back on the image versus sort of sometimes letting it be as it is, because timing is an interesting factor with video. When I'm editing, sometimes they just kind of align perfectly, or these 2 images, and I can see them like formally, they work together, and other times I'm like coming back to like owning control over the image. And so your question of like what to reveal and what to not, I think I never know until I'm there doing it, editing it, you know, it's not always planned out. So.
I'm curious if there's any like symbolism that was revealed to you as you were working on it too, like the one scene where you're in the desert and you have the white cloth, or I don't know if it's a jacket, and you're moving it around. In the beginning it almost looks like angel wings, and it was kind of making me think of like some religious symbolism, so I'm wondering if there's anything that you've seen like being revealed to you too throughout your own process.
Yeah, I like that. I think maybe part of it subconsciously, like maybe not without knowing, maybe it wasn't as intentional, but I'm also majoring in art history, so I think a lot of like, and I just went to Rome, so a lot of Renaissance work has like that religious symbolism and imagery, and like I think actually one of the, like the night and the day one in the desert with the cloth, I was thinking of Michelangelo's sculpture of like night and day as they're like trying to meet, but they can't because it's like dawn and dusk will never meet, but there are these 2 figures, these characters in marble and stone, which sort of signify sort of also their permanence and that they'll never reach, and they're kind of still in this moment. And so I like that with her, my night and day, or my version of it, and meeting through green screen, or not exactly quite meeting through green screen. So maybe sometimes it needs to pop up, but as far as the scene, I'm not sure if that was exactly in mind, but I like your input.
Do you think you're personifying a character or like yourself?
I think it's mostly myself. I don't think I'm trying to be a certain character, rather it's like I'm trying to find myself through movement, if that makes sense. I'm not always thinking about the camera. I'm thinking about what the image will look like on the computer screen when I'm editing. So, like taking that to another place, another space.
Do any of the students want to help her see what your response to kind of the different contexts was? You know, she said at the beginning that, you know, there are different vignettes, desert, Rome, all these different places that can appear separated, but for her they're very unified. Is there anyone who wants to help her see what she did in that respect? Like, do they go together for you? Are there things that link them besides like seeing the green screen, like very basically? Is there anything that links them for you?
For me, I think it's the consistency of you very much links all of them. It feels like we're gradually seeing different parts of you, and even though like your location, your context may be different, it's still very obvious like the same person, and we're seeing maybe more serious sides of you, and then also the carefree aspects as well. Kind of just show yourself as a person and all the different sides that you may have, just like everyone else, which is cool. So for me, I think they tie. Yeah.
Also, I think the inclusion of like you talking with the performer, like being interacted with by the person recording links all of them together, because I noticed that in all the parts that I've seen so far.
I think too, maybe I think I was meaning to turn up the audio a little bit, but I try sort of having this thread of dialogue. So like I think earlier I say, oh, like the mirror's dirty, but you don't really see the mirror until later on, or maybe in another vignette. And so it's like this, like not being aware until later, and how like time sort of affects that in between. Yeah, sort of establishing a grounding effect, but then like yanking that rug from under your feet, or sometimes reinforcing, and sometimes subverting to your sense of space and where you're at.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know more about the places that you've rewinded, because I noticed there's like some video where the people have been rewinded, so the movement is backwards, and then also the audio sounds like you've rewinded it. Would you talk about that decision a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think it also has to do with what I was talking about of like uncertainty of time, because when you reverse something, you're like, your brain is trying to like process that, and so sometimes I have like the audio is normal, but the video's in reverse and you don't really notice until later. And so I like those like gradual transitions of not really recognizing until you sit with the work longer or more. Answers your question.
Honestly, I feel like we've had like some conversation about it, but like your relationship between like your performance aspect and your editing aspect. I feel like you're the first and then the last stage of filming in itself. Like, how is it do you feel like there's like a dialogue between the two? Do you feel like there's a separation between them, because it's like your performance self has no idea what you're like, you have no idea what you're gonna edit, or you have no idea what you're gonna overlay. You're just like playing with materials, and you're kind of like in front of the camera, and even like you don't really see what the camera's capturing because you're behind there. You have these lights shining on you. So like, I guess I'm just like curious more about like your experience with that, and like balancing it.
That's a good question. I think like in terms of communicating with each other, almost like a telephone. So my performance self is speaking with my future editing self, but there's like no real way of doing that, and so it's kind of like a one-way phone call, or they don't quite meet. And so my editing self is sort of trying to glue those pieces together, and they don't always like stick perfectly. Analogy. Yeah, I guess I don't know always what it'll look like until I'm there, and then looking at all the footage together. I see it sort of as like weaving these moving images together, audio and.
But in each case, are you giving yourself, it looks like you bring in like a flat thing, like a mirror or a little canvas or a signpost. Like there are various kinds of things that do suggest that although you don't know how you're going to edit it, you're giving yourself an opportunity for like a palette. Is that the case?
Yes, I think I have thought about, usually my videos are on a tripod. You're seeing me like frontal. It feels very, like I guess I try to make it two-dimensional in a way, because there's already going to be a lot going on, or I'm aware that there's already going to be a lot going on, or the fact that green screen is sort of like through these flatnesses. So I try to be consistent with that, to sort of establish a grounding a little bit more. But I think my moving image, and then also, like you said, sort of this flatness or frontal view is sort of tying the viewer together while I'm doing all these other things around it.
Yeah, please.
Hey Daniel, thank you so much for this. I think the work is fascinating, and I'm really, really interested in seeing like the body as it is there. I consider as the self, so it could be all of us. And you put the self in two very different kinds of environments generally, like either the sort of untouched sort of natural environment, and then the fabricated human environment. And both of them are really densely populated in their own terms. And then there's this center point of the self. Could you talk about that contrast and what it may mean for all of us?
Sure, yeah. I will say too, a lot of these footages have been gathered over time. And so I think the result of this, I sort of wanted an exhibition that kind of encompassed all of my works and all of the places that I filmed. Hence these like sort of vignettes as well, because I didn't want it to be sort of one work and then the next and then the next. I wanted to sort of read between. So I would see it more as like a linear based in terms of my narrative and how I started with video and how I've like kind of grown. Like these desert ones or older ones that I began with like 2 years ago, and then but the editing was all very recently done. But in terms of the body, well, I'm currently taking a sculpture class, and I like the idea of like someone mentioned body as sculpture. And so I sort of, I feel like that goes with my video. When I'm making, when I'm editing, I'm not using like physical tools, but I want it to feel sculptural in a way. And I think the body can oddly like accomplish that, along with the props that I'm using and the different textures.
I'm just to kind of bounce off that, I love your response, because I'm also, as I look at this, I'm reading the tension that we're all in this moment.
In the public and in these places like San Diego, where I grew up and raised, and I'm still here because I love it. I find it beautiful. I find the people here very beautiful. And in terms of what I'm wearing, maybe that was just more of like a formal choices or sort of like visually, I think color-wise, especially in this scene, like the beige, I wanted to almost like be among the environment, but also like when I'm wearing all white, that I'm really emphasizing that I want to be the canvas, or I want to be sort of like the image is projected onto me. So it is also kind of like a dance between looking for things that can be canvases, but also like using myself as a canvas.
Sarah, I think you.
I think so much. It's just amazing to see, and I see like the intersection between you being an artist and then also me doing art history and kind of the languages that you're seeing when both come together. It's just an amazing piece, and I'm so grateful to see it and witness it. I mean, I know that you guys have classes in video art, but I'm just like, how did you learn how to do all this? It's incredible. Like, it just, I mean, I don't know if that's a dumb question, but are these things that you kind of experimented and explored how to do, or what was the process? How did you figure it out? I don't know if that's it was a question. But
It was
it's
absolutely
really hard.
It was absolutely like an experimental, naive approach almost. I really, 3-4 years ago, I had no idea. I didn't know about Premiere Pro. I didn't know the basics of Premiere Pro. Is the editing program. Even like I was speaking of like I didn't really know how to use a camera or focus the lens, and I think it was just spending time at the end of the day, spending time with these things that I was inexperienced with and at first made me uncomfortable, and same thing with performing and making video. I guess I've always been very like observant, and so that came in helpful with using these technical things, was like observing the world or watching media and consuming media and how things are done, how I can do things differently. Because I think I always did want it to be different and but not like reinventive, I guess, in a way, like a balance. So it was really, especially last year, I made like a long project that didn't end up here because I didn't feel like it fit well with my thesis ideas, but a lot of like time just on the software and playing with buttons.
At the same time, can you speak a little bit to the kind of accessibility and the contrast of mediums? So like you're finger painting, you're just like using a brush on a white canvas in the middle of the desert. Like where is the haptic analog, where's the place of this kind of like very accessible haptic analog touch thing that's going on, that and its contrast with the medium that you associate with spectacle?
I guess I'm arguing to sort of that like my pieces are sculptural in a way, that you put materials together to make something, and so I'm finding sort of that connection between the haptic, like you said, the making, especially like I'm not a painter. I can depict things, maybe I can be a little illustrative, like a drawing. I used to do facial things, so I like me as the observer. Yeah, I guess it's different when you combine it with video and the tools that I was sort of familiar with, but I lost my train of thought, but along the line.
This may be something I just didn't experience in other work of yours, although I think I understand this as like an art historian who is really comfortable referencing like Michelangelo and Lynch, which I think is lovely. And I guess I'm curious, also you spoke really beautifully about the performance, the relationship between the performing you and the editing you. Which I think is super interesting, which knits together, right? You're not just collecting footage in some way. You spoke about sort of why you started making this work and what it's done for you, and even spoke about it as a kind of like, therapeutic exposure. And I think it's really sensitive to be able to say, like, those boundaries might be a little blurry, right? Sometimes we want to chop things off and be like, no, that's not part of the work. It's safer for me to say, this is the work here in the gallery. I'm not going to show those other parts, but your work is showing them like intentionally because it's unraveling a lot of the pretenses, right, of some kinds of film. So I guess I have two questions, which is one, do you ever think about, okay, the first one isn't a question, I'm interested, like I think you should go look also at other earlier film histories if you haven't watched Tika Vertov or Mil Garnier's films, they'd really offer some other great things for you to play with in the concept of like what film was supposed to be, who it's for, how we engage with it, what we use it for. That you'd probably find friends there as well if you hadn't watched really early films. Even Winsor McKay, who did vaudeville performances that were then filmed with his drawing. The question is like, do you ever think maybe you'll reintroduce live performance?
Definitely something I've been speaking with Victoria. She thinks I should sort of expose myself to that as well. As of now, I think it was like one step at a time.
Yeah.
But
And that's something I'm not asking because I see
No.
something lacking here more
Yeah.
because I see you open to speaking about maybe the relationship between certain kinds of particularly sculptural metaphor,
Yeah.
you know, about how we produce work in sculpture, about how we produce work in performance, about how, so you seem really able to
Yeah.
do that.
I think it's something I would definitely want to again try with and experiment. But I think there's also this hesitancy. I think because as soon as it becomes alive, it's something that I can't really work on later, or it's like a process that's like immediate and like the moment is gone as soon as it happens. And usually like when I'm recording, I know something's going to happen to it afterwards.
Mhm.
So again, playing with sort of time and space, it maybe becomes too permanent when I'm performing live.
Or like, you know, edge constraints or really kind of understanding what you're doing at different points too, because if you start performing, then you have to document that
Mhm.
performance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You end up in a recursive loop.
Yes,
and you-
exactly.
You
Yeah.
disappear into one of your portals. Thank you.
How conscious are you of the kind of edges of the picture plane when you're composing these individually, and then of course when you're editing them together? Because you have this kind of back and forth with traditional media like paint or whatever, little canvases, little brushes, and then you're showing at one point a print at the beginning. I forget where it is in the loop, but you show a print. It really does feel to me like and then there are very, very different kind of clothing choices as well that kind of refer to something more conventionally feminine, and then these more kind of casual backstage outfits or whatever. It feels to me like there's sometimes more or less consciousness of like the edge, for example, of the rectangle, like conventions of the picture, of picturing, of composing, that are more or less present in particular frames. Like the landscape becomes a little bit more like conscious of the convention of the edge of the picture plane than say this one where your hand goes off or whatever. Is that a break in convention? Is that a privileging of the performative moment that doesn't have to do with the edge of a picture, or?
I think it might have been something that I hadn't really taken into consideration before, except for the fact I think I was really just drawn to rectangles in general. You see a lot of it in the mirrors, and I think at one point I just edited like a rectangle, like see-through opaque thing.
Yeah, like does another way of asking that is does having the picture plane in multiple iterations, like in this sequence, that's part of your breakdown of the spectacle, right? That's part of your revelation of some kind of apparatus, right?
A little bit. I would say the one behind is me playing with feedback, so that too was interesting. That like, it's like breaking down, and continuing to. But I would say I think that was more of a spectacle than it was breaking it down. The behind one versus like the front one. The front of the plane was me breaking this.
Having them together makes us conscious of each one of them.
Yes.
Was anyone else in that class with her reading the Society of the Spectacle and want to like comment on what they remember about that with respect to what she made? Or not? Cool. Do you have any questions for us?
Not at the moment.
And how do you feel about the installation? You know, the choice to project it at this particular scale, is that, you know, just because the projector is where it is? No, you put it in a very particular place. So it's not the size of the wall. It's not much smaller than the wall, but it's not the size of the wall. It doesn't meet the ground.
Yeah.
It does. It's not on a screen. You know, you didn't create another plane, another picture plane.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, what are those choices?
Yeah, I think it took a lot of like playing around within the space to really find out what I really wanted to do. Like first of all, I thought about this wall, but there's like these are in the way, and so I think I just wanted it to be sort of, you walk in, that's the main thing. You closer, it's still sort of respecting the space between the image and then I also at one point I think put more sculptural pieces like the mirrors on this side. It was too distracting. Maybe the lighting was too dark. It like took away, I think, from the image, and so I made it sort of as like on the way up, and you know there's secondary.
Thank you for being vulnerable about your past experiences as well. I appreciate that a lot. And I just want to say, I feel like also your work kind of invites the viewer to be playful and to create well. So it's kind of inspired me a way. And I think the way you set it up, it can kind of like mimic you or mirror you as well. So it's very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, I really love how you chose this wall, because I think it adds to that disorientation, because sometimes you are filming against this wall. Yeah, and so it's like, sometimes it's like, it's another portal, it's just, it feels so wild.
I forgot to mention that too, but I actually filmed some of it right here, so it's like kind of coming back to it, with sort of another portal or full circle.
Did Victoria show you Katja Zeljet's work? Actually, I don't know if I've ever said that name out loud, so I'm not sure if I've said the last name right, but did she show you any of that?
I don't know. I think
This scene in particular reminds me of it, where Katja takes a shaped light into the landscape, and it'll kind of define a picture inside of a larger landscape like that. I don't know if she still does it. It's just the only work of hers that I'm familiar with and kind of captivated by. But check it out.
yeah, definitely. We'll ask for these names at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Wanted to remind you of a couple due dates. I hope you guys got the emails about the Next Gen over the course of the last semester or so. Tomorrow, I think, is the deadline to submit to that. We've had several students included in it over the last couple of years, so it's a really great opportunity. And what else was there? Oh, and then there's a juried show coming up with the curator of the Athenaeum jurying your work. That'll be in about a month or so, or a couple weeks. So start getting your work together for that, but for sure apply to the Next Gen. All right, congratulations, Daniela. Thank you. I'm going to open those doors, maybe. Well, definitely the doors, and then and kind of prop them open. I just closed them because somebody was singing. Thanks.
Singing is a lot better than some of the groaning. I think the question would be about field trip stuff.
Oh, yeah. Also, there was a field trip on Friday.
Sorry.
O sea, porque cuando vas de la luz a entrar, de que siempre que caminas como que no ves nada. De que yo estaba de que aquí, sí, de que dije, voy a caminar. I saw you struggling. No, because the thing is like when you go from darkness, I was It's like sitting right here. Because I see like a vague outline, but I'm like, I literally would walk into someone if I saw your eyes. They had it way too dark in the beginning. Yeah. Like, sorry, way too dark. Like, for me. Yeah. So I was like, I walk in. No, it was really dark. And I didn't realize until Danny was waving at me with Bianca when my eyes adjust. And I'm like, okay.
No, para que se vea. Pero pues ahorita no se ve. Ay, no, because then you cover art. Oh, wait. You can still see the art.
So how have you expressed students that were getting
Yeah, sí, exactly.
I'm just
Yes, absolutely.
Travis is good, right? It's good, huh, Travis?
You don't have class today? You're skipping? Oh my god, no wonder my bag felt so empty because I didn't really go back. I was like, where's my phone? And I'm like, oh, excellent.
I think it went a little longer.
Parking wasn't that bad, like an hour. I parked over there, but the hour was like $1 or something. It was not bad. I mean, I was like, I figured I'd be
Like, did it feel long?
it's like technically up in 10 minutes, but
I know you feel like but for regular.
These are my high school
That's true.
Yeah, we should celebrate.
Let me know what's important.
Yeah.
If I miss anything. I just like taught in Canvas.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
No, me toca y es como ya. Vámonos, vámonos. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. That's how critiques go. Like, that's really? I'm thinking when I was on the spot, I'm like, I tried.